Welcome to On Point. I'm your host, Roger McConnell, and I'll be here every other Tuesday at 1 p.m. with topical shows addressing the needs and concerns of military veterans and active duty personnel. For those of you who have just joined me, you're listening to part 2 of my conversation with Iraq War veteran Jay Moss.
We felt like, I personally felt like, the main definition of an occupational force as we would drive around these neighborhoods and these farming areas, just from either the fearful looks we would get from people or the angry looks we would get from people, we certainly didn't feel welcome there. And it wasn't until that first election that I really felt like a liberator. And that was exemplified as we were patrolling past some of the election centers that were established. People were holding their babies out for us to kiss them. And that was very gratifying. And it really affirmed that we did have a purpose and a reason to be there and make the sacrifices of ourselves, of the lives of our comrades that were lost. And, it was a good feeling on those election days.
You felt like the people valued our presence there.
Definitely. I mean, it was a drastic change.
Now you'll have to pop that out of there. But when you would leave the FOB there, you were riding mostly in Humvees.
Yeah, we were the 10th Mountain Division. When I was there, well, at least I'll just say Charlie Company 431, we are a straight up leg unit. And if you don't know what a leg unit is, it means everything you take onto the battlefield is on your back. You're either dropped off in a truck or in a helicopter, and you're walking your way into combat, and you're walking yourself back out if everything turns out all right. So we don't train with vehicles, and of course, when we got to Iraq, we were mounted at that time. So it was a pretty big change, as far as our battle drills, how we trained back in the rear. Those battle drills would still be effective, but there was a whole new element in being mounted, and how we would approach certain situations, how we would react to an ambush is a lot different in a vehicle than it is on a foot patrol.
There was a stage in our occupation of Iraq where the Hummers weren't as densely armored as even the ones that we see around Maelstrom here.
No, absolutely. In fact, that big push that we did from Kuwait to Baghdad was predominantly in light-skinned Humvees that had absolutely no armor.
Whoa.
They have little canvas doors, and we pulled the canvas doors off, and we made harnesses where we could actually turn sideways instead of sitting in the seat pointing forward, where we could kind of lean outside of the Humvee with our weapon pointed out just to look intimidating, if anything. We had some guys, our mortar section had kind of the pickup version of a Humvee, and they stuffed sandbags with newspaper to make it look like full sandbags and stapled them to the wood on the outside of the Humvee. I thought it was pretty funny.
These things wouldn't even stop small arms fire?
There was no armor whatsoever.
None. That's crazy, because all the vehicles around Maelstrom have always, since I can remember, had what appeared to be pretty thick armor plating on the sides. And you didn't have it where you really needed it.
Right. At that time, I think there was definitely a supply issue with equipment. Things escalated over there a lot quicker than I think, we were prepared for, as far as
the counterinsurgency,
right?
That whole thing.
It was actually Donald Rumsfeld had to address some of these issues. I remember at a press conference that we just had to basically play the cards we were dealt at that time. But just through the year I was there, we got plussed up with the M114, which is the full up armored. We did receive armor kits for the non-armored Humvees. All the extra armor really almost hampered those Humvees, though. They had non-turbocharged engines, so they were underpowered with all the armor. The suspensions weren't designed to support all that armor, and they drove horribly.
How much would you guess the armor weighed when you outfitted them with that kit?
Gosh, I mean, I would just be pulling a number off the top
Pull
of my
one
head,
out.
but it's.
Yes.
I mean, it would have to be at least a ton.
Wow. Okay.
I would think.
So
With
no wonder
the thick glass, with all the, armor on the sides. Unfortunately, there's no armor on the bottom, and that's been addressed with some of the newer vehicles that are employed out there. But even on the nice M114s that we received, which incidentally did save my life on more than one occasion, didn't have armor on the bottom, but were very well armored on the sides. The glass was very effective, protecting against small arms, RPGs, RPG 7s, as well as IED attacks.
That would stop an RPG-7?
If I say RPG 7, I know we've had them.
Seems like we were up to RPG-15 in Vietnam.
Yeah, they had
can't
some
remember.
old there's RPGs that would go right through that with the shape charge.
Yeah.
I hope I don't have my nomenclature incorrect, but we had RPGs impact the Humvee, and it did as little as just scratch the paint. Literally just like a quarter size impact spot with some splotching off of that, almost like a paintball gun hit it. I mean,
That's
it was
crazy. They've either improved the armor or something has changed since Vietnam. Those things were lethal.
Well, I know the M113, like you had to ride in, had aluminum armor,
Right.
which wasn't
It would stop small arms.
right.
A 50 caliber machine gun would go through, and RPGs would just go through and explode. We were the fish in the barrels.
Right.
So those things were almost more dangerous than being afoot, except that we had a nice weapons platform and we could pack a lot of shooting irons out of there and flamethrowers and all that. But yeah,
No, it's reassuring to have some firepower with
yes,
you.
it is.
It's the force equalizer that makes things work for you.
So
But I was going to just kind of ultimately we were talking about the Humvees with the up armor kits that we'd have to put on, and I kind of felt like one of those Humvees that had all the up armor kit, with all the gear we had to wear. Ultimately, my first deployment, we just had to wear the basic armored, the IBA, which was just a basic jacket with
like a flak vest.
yes, but had a ceramic plate front and back. Was not lightweight, but not too bad. And you had some other accessories with it that we didn't have to wear. And when we got to Iraq, not only did we have to wear the collar piece and the groin protector, I'll say. We had to wear these DAPs. I mean, they kept adding more and more protection, which I appreciate until you were in a 120-degree environment in an unair conditioned vehicle and you just want to ventilate yourself. And
The Hummers didn't have air.
they did have air, but it was rarely operational. And if it was, I mean, it was pretty minimalistic.
And
They actually made it a regulation where you could not go on patrol unless your AC worked, but we would have never been able to go on patrol. So it was just kind of one of those things that
regulations.
would, make people feel
held
good
no
up top,
water.
but
Yeah.
we were still sweating it.
After 9/11, you joined the service for patriotic reasons, defend the homeland, and you believed in all this. I trust, after having spoken with you this morning, that you went in for all the best reasons. Some of your viewpoints kind of changed as you were in Iraq, as you saw some of the situations that occurred brought on by maybe overzealousness on behalf of American soldiers. You want to go into that a little bit?
Well, ultimately, I was on a patrol one night. A journalist had been abducted, and I think we're all familiar with what happens or what can happen to a U.S. citizen or someone sympathetic to the U.S. cause there. It's a pretty dire situation if you're abducted. And we were out in force trying to find this journalist. And as we were searching vehicles coming on and off a big freeway, a vehicle blew up behind us, like a V-bed, a vehicle-borne IED. And I was pulling far side security, and this incident, this explosion happened behind me.
You were in a Humvee.
I was outside of the Humvee.
You were?
I was
okay.
on foot, just pulling security down this boulevard. And the vehicle that exploded, I actually saw go by on my far side. And after the explosion, a volume of small arms fire ensued. And I didn't know the nature of the fire. And the next thing I knew, my squad had picked up and was starting to move past me. And I got online with everybody, and I heard someone yelling, "That's them, get them." And I looked and I saw two military-aged men fleeing across a traffic circle, kind of like what we got over by 2J's now, but a larger scale. And they were heading towards an alleyway. And it was at night, and I had always loaded my magazines with, they gave us tracers to alternate every 5 rounds, but I would put all my tracers at the bottom and then the rest of them at the very top of my magazine, so I could initially see where I was shooting and then know when I was running out. And I looked through my ACOG optic. I see this guy running. I fired my weapon once, went over his shoulder. I fired a second time, and I struck this enemy, and I saw the guy go down, and the personnel next to him went down as well, sprawled himself out. And as I swept past this guy, I saw blood cascading out of his head, and doing my job, I just passed that by and continued to pull security, not knowing the extent of this ambush or incident that I'd been taken up in. And ultimately, the guy that I engaged was an off-duty Iraqi National Guardsman who was just finishing up dinner with his nephew when the car blew up, and they were fleeing the scene. And upon finding that news out, it just really devastated me. That was the one thing, aside from losing my own life or my buddy's life. I mean, that was the one thing I did not want to happen, and it happened. And I was afraid on a lot of levels. I was afraid because I'd just taken a life, and I was afraid that I might get in trouble. I thought maybe, I would be, subjected to some kind of UCMJ. You don't know. And it was really
court martial or military justice.
No, I mean, I didn't engage that guy. I mean, I heard "that's them, get them." I was trying to protect myself, my guys,
the men in your unit. You
right.
did what you had to do.
I thought these were the guys that had detonated that. And I was just absolutely crushed by that experience. It made it really difficult for me for the rest of my deployment. I was second guessing myself quite a bit, second guessing why I was there, why we were there, winning hearts and minds, yet the bulk of fatalities I witnessed there were all inflicted on the civilian population. Now, Roger, following the incident that I just described to you, Command had officially determined that the man whose life I took was not an enemy combatant, and now his surviving family was entitled to a voucher for $2,500 in the wrongful death of their loved one. So please understand that I really appreciate the idea of compensating that man's family, But for me, the thought of $2,500 for a man's life just seemed entirely inadequate. And the guilt that I experienced for pulling the trigger on that terrible night weighed even heavier on my heart. Subsequently, I was later injured in a mortar attack on our fob while we were preparing for a raid that was scheduled later that night. And in that attack, 11 of my platoon members were injured. And the kid that was standing next to me sustained grievous wounds, while mine were relatively minor. And ultimately, his body took the damage that I felt like I deserved to receive. And for the rest of that deployment, through the rest of my military service, and into my civilian life, I really felt that I deserved nothing good. I believed that any future happiness that I would experience would just diminish the punishment I felt that I should be, the punishment that I felt that I deserved. And that's still my struggle today.
And I think we've all seen some of the movies, some of the shows on Military Channel, where a car would approach one of your stationary units, let's say, for instance, and they had been ordered to stop as they were approaching this one of our units, and they kept coming. That happened.
That would happen pretty regularly. A lot of nights there was a curfew in Bagnell, like no vehicular traffic. So that made it easy for us, because if you did see a vehicle, it was easy to isolate that vehicle and ultimately not disable it, but at least stop the vehicle, get the occupants out, and see what the situation is. But during the daytime, it's bumper to bumper traffic. I mean, vehicles are all around you. You can't have a safety zone. And the whole process plays into the insurgents' hands, because as we try to protect ourselves from a vehicle that's coming too close, having a non-uniform enemy, these kind of situations are going to happen. Right. As you're just trying to perform your duty and protect your men and equipment.
For those of you who have just joined me, you're listening to part 2 of my conversation with Iraq War veteran Jay Moss.
And ultimately, we did operate with a high level of discipline. I mean, we had a lot of incidents where we disabled cars with small arms fire, where no one was injured. I remember one night specifically, a car was coming up on our checkpoint, and we disabled the vehicle by shooting out the tires and the engine block. And once we extracted the gentleman that was driving, he was just inebriated. And he very easily could have been shot and killed.
Could have been killed, exactly.
But there was a lot of incidents like that where we disabled vehicles and no one was hurt in the process.
The whole time you went sweeps door to door, you obviously had to come in contact with the Iraqi people often.
Yes.
And a lot of times that winning of the hearts and minds got lost somehow. You witnessed some things that disappointed you. People are people, and people get overstressed, and all of a sudden they're doing things that they wouldn't have done. But in any event, how well do you think we did at winning the hearts and minds in Iraq?
Gosh, the longer you're there and the more you're subjected to as far as attempts on your life and the lives of your comrades, you start to lose an ability, you lose your sensitivity towards that population through just the process of wanting to protect yourself.
And your friends. And
you're absolutely. So the way that I know, the way that we would handle just your average person that we would search a vehicle or something, ultimately they started getting handled, more roughly. But ultimately, I remember being on a foot patrol in a marketplace, and an old man kind of approached me and just looked me most sternly in the eyes and said, "Saddam gone. Now you leave." And I think that was the overall sentiment of the people, at least while I was there, is that they were thankful that we had ousted Saddam, and the tyranny, the horrible atrocities that he inflicted on a large part of that population. They were really thankful for that. But being as old of a culture as they are, I think they're pretty prideful and wanted to really form their new nation in a manner they wanted to, and kind of resented us, from continuing to reside there.
I think we could all sympathize with that feeling. I can't imagine being occupied here in America. I think that's one of the things we've always dreaded and fought against, and something that keeps our spirit of patriotism alive, is so that we are a free people, as free as is allowed in any democracy. There are abuses and there are a lot of things that go on that could be fixed, but you saw some things that needed to be fixed, but you did your best.
I sure tried to do my best.
And you met some people and you formed some bonds. I heard you talking about the kids. And
yeah, no, it was so interesting to me because we had paid informants, that were on the payroll, basically, trying to gather intelligence on where the insurgents were operating out of, who were their financiers, a whole slew of information we were trying to gather through paying informants. And ultimately, all the raids that I did on targeted homes, middle of the night raids where we'd come in and separate men and women, and ultimately take the men in, we would blindfold, bind them, search the house, and we really never would find anything. I think I raided over 30 homes in that manner, and we'd take their laptops and stuff like that. We'd never get any feedback on if our findings were successful, if we got the right guys.
You were ordered to take the laptop so that they could.
We would take any kind of electronic device, phones, laptop. Some of them had PlayStation 3s, if you can believe that. We would take that kind of any kind of electronic that could hold some kind of data. We would take all the men, any military age, which a military age man is anyone from basically puberty on up. So it's a wide age range there. And it was really hard, after you have that adrenaline burst of going into a place and the whole pump up before you go in, the adrenaline burst of going in, clearing the rooms, separating these people out, taking these guys into custody. Once that subsided, once that adrenaline subsided for me, not getting any feedback on the backside if we got the right guys or not just has really nagged at me, because seeing a family literally ripped apart was difficult to witness. The screaming of the women, the kids crying, not knowing what's going to happen to their husband or brother. There's whole generations that live in these same houses.
I know you sympathize with their plight, that
what
it was
absolutely.
like to have these armor-cladded men walk into their house and scream at them to get down. And did you ever have to exchange any shots or anything in any of these, or they were all pretty much routine?
There were 2 incidents where shots were fired. I really don't want to discuss that right now, if that's okay.
And that's okay. I understand. This might be a question that would be better asked later, but would you do this again if you knowing all that you know? Would you go down through that whole process in Butte again, joining the service?
I absolutely would. As difficult as some of these experiences have been, in a lot of ways, I mean, it's really opened my mind up to just seeing things in a completely different light than I ever would have. Not only the bonds that I've made with, my fellow soldiers, going through these events, suffering through the heat, discomfort, hunger, thirst, separation, relying on each other, having each other's backs in a way that I will probably never experience again. Having to totally rely on each other is something I wouldn't trade for the world. Experiencing, to experience another culture, even though, it's not like going on vacation to Europe or even to the Middle East as a civilian. We didn't have a lot of real personal interaction with Iraqis. Any opportunity I did, I really tried to make the most of the opportunities. Like when we operated out of a World Food Center for quite a period. During those elections, all the ballots in Baghdad were brought back to this World Food Center, which was secured by some Iraqi personnel as well as ourselves. And I was able to share meals with these guys. And even though there was an absolute language barrier, just seeing the smile as the universal language and being able to make each other laugh without even, verbally communicating was really powerful and really uplifting, really inspiring to make some bonds as temporary as they were with some of these guys. And
communication, pure communication.
Yes.
Now, when you got back, you came home to a wife, and everything was changed. You were a different man. You'd flown too close to the flame, and you had trouble.
Yes.
We've got like a couple of 3 minutes. Do you want to go into that, or do you want to go into the fact that it's your story?
Well, I would take this opportunity just to tell Jamie I love you so much, and I thank you for sticking through all of my struggles and coming full circle with me at this point, as I'm on a solid path now, and I just love you. So thank you.
You're getting counseling?
Yes. I started getting counseling ultimately at Fort Harrison. I had a great counselor there. I went through prolonged exposure therapy. Spent quite a few hours at Walmart trying to reacclimate myself to crowded places and uncomfortable environment there. I've received I can't give the VA, at least VA Montana, enough credit. I mean, not only on the physical health side, they've been absolutely wonderful, as well as the mental health side. I honestly feel like I get better care from the VA than I did when I was active duty. I mean, it's been fantastic. They've taken great care of me.
But you're going to, here in the next several weeks, you're going to renew your vows with your wife? Well,
through my implosion that I kind of went through after
meltdown.
Yes, after returning, or after becoming a civilian again, I divorced Jamie in 2007, and ultimately we are remarrying August 7th, so right around the corner here.
Congratulations. What would you give any other soldier going into combat, what advice would you have for them on how to best deal with what's going to happen to you, the changes that are undoubtedly going to take place? Would you agree with that, first of all?
Yes, that's what it's going to be everybody's own personal, unique experience. Even guys within my platoon that all saw the same thing happen, everybody reacts to it differently. Everybody processes it differently. You know, you see the full range of emotions when something happens, especially to one of your guys. So for someone that's going to be going into combat, inherently you're going to be living day to day, minute by minute, and the biggest thing I can say is complacency kills, and it's so hard not to get complacent, especially with long durations in between incidents. You can't be on high alert 24/7, and you have such a huge exposure being over there for a year at a time. And, don't get complacent.
Yeah, that's...
Complacency kills. That's the...
It sounds simple to not let yourself slough, but it is so tough.
It's very tough, and it seems like it's just like being tired when you're driving.
Right.
If you fall asleep behind the wheel, chances are you're going to die. But you can't. There's times you got to pull over and get some rack time. Unfortunately, in combat, you can't just pull over.
No getting off the train there when it's in the heat. What other thoughts have you got, Jay? Anything else that you want to say?
I'm just so thankful to be back home. I'm so thankful to be in Montana. There's nowhere else that I would personally rather be. I love this state. Just being back home here is healing. Went to Glacier couple weekends ago, and just seeing those things, those kind of sights, just being in nature and slowing down and just letting the noise dissipate. I'm really thankful to live somewhere where we can do that. It's really healing for me.
Welcome home, Jay Moss, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Roger. I appreciate the opportunity to share some things.
You've been listening to part 2 of my conversation with Iraq War veteran Jay Moss. On Point continues to air every other Tuesday at 1 p.m. on Montana Public Radio, KGPR, Great Falls. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas for future shows, please contact me, Roger McConnell, at 406-799-6709 or an email onpointkgpr@bresnan.net.